Disclaimer, trigger warning. The We Are One podcast aims to shed light on the abuse experience within the independent fundamental Baptist church. The stories shared are from survivors who bravely recount their personal experiences. It is important to note that unless an abuser has been convicted in a court of law, they are presumed innocent until proven guilty. The podcast does not serve as a legal judgment, but rather is a platform for survivors to share their truth. Welcome to the We Are One podcast. Let's jump right into today's episode. Here's your hosts, Olivia and Jennifer.
Welcome back to the We Are One podcast. I'm your host, Olivia.
And I'm Jen.
And we are looking forward to the next speaker. Hello, Alissa.
Hi, Alissa.
Hi. So could you briefly introduce yourself and your connection to the IFB?
Sure. So my name is Alissa. I was born in Jackson, Michigan. My grandparents started going to North Sharon Baptist Church with Brother Weiniger.
There's not a person in my church who would not be appalled at doing anything harmful to a child. And I believe your churches are the same way.
At the time, his assistant deacon Timothy Leonard and Mark Fuller were both being charged with molestation in 1992.
He would call us in one by one and touch us.
He is Mark Fuller, a soul winner in the bus ministry of North Sharon Baptist Church, southwest of Ann Arbor. Fuller's been in jail since late last year on charges he molested young children who had been brought to the church aboard his bus. At a court hearing earlier this year, 10-year-old JJ told how Fuller took him and several other little boys on a church camping trip. JJ and another youngster testified Fuller led them in group masturbation sessions and later ordered them into his tent one at a time to be sodomized or perform oral sex.
He would tell me to go out of the tent and then he would call somebody else in.
9-year-old Mike testified about the pain of being sodomized by Fuller, the church bus driver.
I told him it hurt and for him to quit.
Did he?
Yeah.
Whittinger wrote a book about it called A Church Falsely Accused and published it in 1995. In 2013, he was forced to resign from his church in Georgia because of molestation charges brought to light from 20 years earlier.
On top of that, he was also arrested for assaulting a female teacher at his church school.
Some people know his name if you're in the IFB circle. My dad grew up Southern Baptist, but they started going there when my dad was like 15 or 16, I believe. And then my parents got pregnant for me, and the church told them that they had to get married. So I was born into that church. When I finished kindergarten, my dad decided he wanted to go to Bible college, so we moved to First Baptist in Indiana.
Well, thank God for the Pope. He's against abortion. He's always been for getting all the Catholics he can get. Brother Jack Hyles likes to boast he runs the largest Sunday school in the world. He may be right. Before a cloud of scandal drifted over his First Baptist Church of Hammond, Indiana, Hyles bragged he had a membership of 100,000. The Hyles empire is formidable. In addition to his church, he runs Hyles-Anderson Bible College in Schererville, Indiana.
College and graduated, and my sister and I went through most of our schooling through Hammond Baptist. And then in high school, for me in high school, we moved from First Baptist up to Grace Baptist in Gaylord, Michigan with John Jenkins.
Feels like you're under absolute demonic assault tonight. I'll tell you what, the devil knows your potential.
And then we were, yeah, we've been around. We were homeschooled up there. And then when I finished high school, I moved back to First Baptist to go to Hyles-Anderson College and was there until I almost graduated. I had a few credits left and just didn't feel like taking prayer class for the third time, so because I kept failing it. And then moved back to North Sharon, where I got married to someone in the IFB. And when I left him is when I actually left like the IFB entirely.
Okay. And so can you describe, like, so you said like your parents, worked at Hyles or whatever, like you guys
Mhm.
moved to First Baptist Church of Hammond, which is like one of the most like popular ones in the IFB. Like if you know
Yeah.
everybody knows Jack Hyles.
Yep.
Can you describe like the involvement within the church? Like what, like if you're
Mhm.
able to, can you explain like what your parents did or like what did you help out at all or?
Yeah, our family was very involved in the church. My dad was on staff after he finished at Hyles-Anderson. He ran a bus route. He helped start the chapel ministry with Ted Spear. There was a couple of the chapels that my dad actually helped like to start. Like I remember going in and painting the buildings and getting the yards cleaned up and all that kind of stuff. He also worked for Daryl Moore in the missions area of the church and was on staff with him for I think up until the point that we moved to Gaylord. Um, Being a staff member means your entire family is on staff, at least at First Baptist. So my dad worked 40 to 80 hours a week. My mom worked at the church for 30 to 40 hours a week. Anything that my mom needed to get done for my dad, we came along to get them done. Anytime there was a big conference, we were the ones that got to steam all the flags for missions conference and put all the stickers in for pastor school for the little donation books that everyone got and all that kind of stuff. We all worked on the bus routes and just anything that needed to be done, even if it wasn't your department or your ministry, the staff member's family was also on staff. You just weren't paid for it, but most I'd say I saw my dad for 5 to 6 hours a week through grade school and junior high if we were lucky because he was just there so much. And if we weren't at school or an after school program, we were doing something at the church to clean or set up for something or volunteering, just whatever it was that they needed, we were doing it all the time.
Um, and do you know like years, like what, like kind of like timeline for?
We would have moved to First Baptist, I believe, was it like 1997 or 98? And then moved up to Gaylord in, oh, what was it? I think it was 2009. No, 2004, sorry. Because I was going into ninth grade. So it would have been 2004. We actually moved to Gaylord about 2 months after everything with Aaron Willand happened from the documentary. We moved up there right on the tail end of all of that going on. So we missed him by just a couple months.
Interesting. So you went to the school up there in Gaylord?
We went for a semester. We moved up there right at the end of my first semester of 8th grade. So we did the second semester up in Gaylord. My mom had gone to Hyles-Anderson to get a teaching degree. So they told her that if she just came on as a teacher up there, that my sister and I could go for free. And we did. And that's when we started seeing just how messed up of a place Grace Baptist was. Um, there were tons of rules, but no rules. It was a normal thing for kids to be sneaking off to do whatever it was that they wanted that wouldn't even be appropriate in most public schools. But because their dads were on staff or they were one of the families in the church that had a lot of money, if a teacher did try to go to the principal to make him aware of the situation, they were yelled at and told to just be quiet. One time my mom, she taught the 5th grade class and one of the principal's children was in that class. And she mentioned something about doing their homework, or she was just making a comment in class. And the principal's son told her to shut the F up in front of the entire classroom. And so, of course, my mom wrote him a demerit slip, told him to go see his dad, and he came back a few minutes later with his dad, and the dad pulled my mom out of class and in front of his child, ripped up the demerit slip and said, "Don't you ever discipline my son again." And that kid went on to, he pushed me around a few times, like physically. One time he went into the nursery because he was having a bad day and shoved me while I was holding a newborn and then trashed the entire nursery. He was just nothing but problems. the whole time we were up there. But after that first semester, my mom said that she's not teaching there anymore, and she pulled my sister and I out and just homeschooled us for the rest of the time that we were up there.
Well, thank goodness she had the foresight to say, like, let's just be done with this.
Yeah, it was crazy.
So, take us back to the beginning, to North Sharon Baptist Church. What was your experience like there?
The memories that I have there, for the most part, for me at least, are good. I was so young. Yeah, I was only there through kindergarten, and then my cousins, my aunts and uncles, my grandparents, all of them were still at that church up until just the last few years. So whenever we came back to visit grandma or, we're home on vacation, anything like that, it was still our church. As we got older, they let us just step in and out of the youth group as we were there and things like that. As we got older, we started to see some of the hypocrisy, in the church. My sister got yelled at several times by one of the staff ladies because she saw her out at Walmart wearing a jean skirt that came, like, you could see like that much of the bottom of her knee, and went off on her in the middle of Walmart. And then the next night in choir on Wednesday night, in front of the entire choir, told her that she wasn't welcome there anymore and kicked her out of the choir. And then we saw her at Walmart 2 or 3 days later wearing shorts. Yeah, just stuff like that. My sister was 7th grade, I mean, she was just a kid. If you had a problem with it, because technically it was breaking dress code, for, but like, there's right and wrong ways to enforce rules and standards that you have. Even if looking back now, I think they're all kind of crazy. There's right and wrong ways to do it, but we dealt with stuff like that as we got older. When I left Hyles-Anderson and came back, I wasn't attending as regularly because of work. But Sundays I was always there, but I was missing Wednesdays a lot. And every time that I came in on Sunday morning, I would get at least 3 people with the whole, well, look who decided to show up for church today kind of comments because I had missed a Wednesday. And just everything. There's a lot of churches in the IFB that deal with everything's a big show while you're there, but they don't follow it as much when they're out. That happens a lot, especially in the smaller churches that like really follow all of it. And that is something that they really struggled with. I don't know if it's still that way. I haven't set foot back in it in a very long time, but yeah.
What was the main thing that like kind of turned you off to the IFB? I know you said you were married in the IFB.
Mm-hmm.
I also was married in the IFB, divorced. He was an abusive husband. So how, like, walk us through like maybe how you guys met. Did you meet at Bible college? Did you meet at a church? Was it like did somebody like introduce you and say, this is who you're supposed to be with, or whatever kind of thing? Walk us through all that and your relationship there.
Yeah. So we actually met at North Sharon. Our moms actually used to be friends back when they were in high school, and his family had moved back to the area and started going to North Sharon. And it was such a small church. There were like 2 guys to choose from within 5 years of me. So anytime anybody new came to the area, they were immediately like, everybody wanted that person because it was like, just, there was something new,
Yeah.
And I thought he was cute, and so I told my mom, and our moms immediately were like, oh, they're supposed to be together, and went through so much to set us up. And when we were dating, I thought he was a perfectly nice guy, I mean, and he was a very nice person. And then I was already at Hyles-Anderson. I'd met him on a break, and then he decided to go to Hyles, and he was only there for I think a year, and then it just wasn't what he wanted to do. We dated for 4.5 years before we got married, and had our first kiss and everything at the altar, like how you're supposed to do, like good little IFB kids, and then we got married about a year later. We were married for almost 5 years before I left. There was definitely a switch that happened as soon as we got back from our honeymoon. It was like he was a completely different person. And like, sure, like as relationships mature and age, things change, the heat kind of settles down, like things change as you grow and all that, but it was just immediate. We waited 4.5 years to get to be together, and then when we got back, there was nothing. There just never was. And I feel like part of that is because of purity culture. You spend 20 years of your life being told any physical touch with the opposite sex is wrong and terrible and sinful and evil. It's hard to just flip that on to being okay because you said some words in a pretty dress. It doesn't just work like that. But even just the way that he treated me and stuff, I basically became his mom. Um, he literally couldn't do anything for himself. We ran out of one time. My now fiance still loves to talk about this moment. We ran out of milk one time, and I was house sitting for someone almost an hour away. And we had a little grocery store 2 blocks from the house. You could see it from our front door. And instead of going and getting it, I actually drove 2 hours round trip to get him a gallon of milk because he just was not capable of doing anything. And in a lot of IFB churches, that's how men are raised. Men are the ones who are the best and brightest, and God's called them to do everything and anything, but they're also infants that need a wife/mom around to help them do anything in life. And it's just
total betas. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Most of them they don't know how to do anything. I can relate to that one too. Yeah.
I can't and I won't. I'm not. I refuse.
Right. Yeah. Now I know better. Now I have a little bit of real world experience to know, like, no, they can.
Yeah. No, I mean, I know people that, they get married to, like, after Bible college or whatever. And I mean, so far they're all married, but they have even admitted to me, like, it was a different, like, wait, we can hold hands, or wait, we can do that. And I always joked and was like, how awkward was it to kiss for the first time and everybody's watching you, right? Yeah. Like, and they were like, we didn't know what to do. And I'm like,
no. It was so weird. Like, ours was so bad, our pastor actually laughed at us and told us to try it again.
No.
Know what to do, like, we have no experience with that. We were 22 when we got married and had never kissed anybody else. Like, of course it's going to be weird and awkward. Like, we were not practicing for the last 5 years.
Yeah.
So that was fun. But oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, you're totally fine. So, like, me and you had talked before this, obviously, and so like I know a little bit, more or whatever. And so to continue about the cult marriage, move on from it. How did your family react to you leaving him?
So when I finally told my mom and dad that I was leaving, I fully expected them to completely disown me. I had prepared myself for that mentally. I was ready for it. I had watched my aunts and uncles disown their kids for far less through the years. But I was at a point where, like, it was what I had to do. It was just starting to have hints of physical abuse. I know it's either physical abuse or it's not. I still have a hard time getting my head around just the black and white of it. But it was starting to head in that direction. So when I finally told my mom, she surprised me and was actually very supportive of it. She's like, I get it, she's like, no, and at that point I hadn't even told them about the things that were a little more on the physical side that were starting to happen. I just more of the neglect and being his mother, just more of that type of stuff is all I had really told her about. And she was very supportive. She set up a lunch with me and her and my dad the next day. I actually told my mom that I was leaving him at a bridal show because my mom is a bridal seamstress and she had a thing there, and we just got to talking to all these brides, and I just broke down and told her what was going on. But yeah, she set up. So I told my dad, and I thought he was the one who was going to be like, no, you have to stick it out. Marriage is forever. Divorce is bad. That's not what God wants. I was waiting for the speech, and he was also very supportive. I think between seeing their siblings or his siblings, lose all of their children because they kept saying, nope, you made a mistake, you're gone, we're done with you. I think that having watched that all these years made them kind of second guess that just the finality of, nope, you did something God doesn't like, so get out, you know? And then they'd also, I think, seen on their own just how much I changed being with my ex. He was separating me from them. We went and saw them like once a year, and it was on Christmas morning, and we lived 20 minutes away. And I just, if I went over to spend the day with my mom, he'd get all angry about it and make me deal with just him just being angry, you know, for a couple of days. I was gonna use a cuss word, but I'm trying to not. But I don't know who all watches. I don't know what you guys do on here, so but like I think they had noticed. Okay. But I think they had noticed just me pulling away from them more and not being my normal self. So I think that also helped. But I feel like if we were had still been at First Baptist when this had happened, it wouldn't have gone that way. I think just being in a smaller, more somewhat relaxed environment kind of helped with it as well. But yeah, they surprised me though. I thought for sure they were gonna they were gonna disown me.
Yeah. So let's take it a little bit back. So before the marriage, can you talk about your time at Hyles?
Yeah, so Hyles was an interesting place. Um, oh, yeah, so when I got there, because of who my dad was, everyone already knew who I was. I was an HB brat, even though most people didn't realize I spent most of my life at HB. But then every class I went to, the teacher would be reading off like the roll call for the first day and get to my name and be like, "Oh, are you so and so's kid?" And that's what I dealt with for my first like semester and a half every time I started a new class. At that point in my life, my parents had actually stopped attending church because they were up at Grace, and Grace was just such a mess compared to First Baptist. Like they could see it more at Grace for what it truly was. And they stopped attending. They weren't going to church at all. And when I got to Hyles, there were so many like City Baptist kids, like the school for like the bus kids or whatever that they have there. There were so many kids at Hyles-Anderson that had attended CB with the help of like my sister and I selling candy bars and my dad paying their way and all this, that when they got there, it was all, "Oh, where's your dad at? Where's your dad? How's he doing?" And I spent 2 years at Hyles-Anderson lying and covering up the fact that my parents weren't in church anymore because that's what I was supposed to do. Because if they found out that my dad wasn't in church, what would that do to them? Would they quit going to church because my dad stopped going to church? Well, now it's going to be my fault because I'm the one who told them that my dad wasn't going to church. And it was just a year and a half, 2 years of dealing with everyone knowing who I was because of my dad and wanting to know, like staff members wanting to know what great thing he's doing in the ministry today. And kids who are now at Hyles-Anderson because of me and my dad who wanted to know. And that was really tough. And that's something I've never talked to my parents about. They don't like, they're back in church now. They're like full into the cult of it all again, unfortunately. But aside from that, just the difficulty of like balancing all the things they wanted you to do every single day. Like I went there on the Jericho program. So like we had to get up and go to breakfast in the morning. You couldn't sleep in, but then you were working so late into the night. Ministry was a 15-hour day, all day, Saturday and Sunday, having to try to like pay for the buses and being on the bus routes and all this different stuff that they want the college kids to do financially, but you're not allowed to work. And if you are allowed, there's just so much stuff that makes it so difficult to just try to exist. There are so many people I knew in my first couple of years that had so many health issues because of just the sleep deprivation and not having the best food and not being, for some girls, just being able to afford like medications and different things like that. It was just impossible. And it was just go, 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 go. And you were constantly being told in chapel that you weren't doing enough. And there was just all this guilt, and it was just a lot for sure being there. I went into it kind of expecting it because I'd grown up there. I heard Hyles say over and over again that the college isn't a college, it's a training ground, and our students aren't students, they're soldiers, and it's boot camp. And, I remember hearing all that. I grew up at First Baptist, so even as a 9-year-old, my Saturdays and Sundays were 15 to 20 hours long, but it was still a struggle being older and being trapped there. Like us girls, you weren't allowed to leave. The guys could go wherever they wanted. If they decided at 8 o'clock at night that they wanted to go to Walmart, they could just go to Walmart. Girls were only allowed to leave campus it changed every year that I was there, but like 7 a.m. to 3 p.m. or something like that, you had to be on campus. And if you did want to leave, like my freshman year, there'd have to be at least 3 of us in the car, and one had to be a junior or senior. And then all of us would have to get our own separate permission slips signed by the Dean of Women's office. And then you had to leave one copy at the Dean of Women's office, have one copy on you, and then have another copy posted on your door so that way everyone on campus knew where you were and where you were supposed to be. Just to go get nylons that we had to wear every single day to class.
That's insane. I mean, it doesn't shock me though.
I'm familiar with all that.
Right. So it's like, it doesn't shock me, but then it's like, oh, okay, like another person had to go through that type of shock. So I know, like, again, you had told me a little bit. So you guys moved to Gaylord, Michigan. Can you explain? Are you open to explaining why you got moved to Michigan?
A little bit, but yeah. I know I told you some other stuff. Yeah,
that's totally fine.
So my parents went through a little bit of a rough patch, which happens in any marriage, but especially, like I said before, you are going so hard at First Baptist. Like I said, I only saw my dad about 5 or 6 hours a week. I'm sure my mom didn't see him much more, when there's that level of just work and all the juggling and all that. But anyway, so they started going through a little bit of a rough patch, and they went to Scott for counseling about it. And he said that we need to move to Grace. Scott is the reason that we went to Grace Baptist. He told us that it was like a mini First Baptist. It still has all the ministries and all the different stuff like that. So you guys can just readjust over there and keep doing what you're doing for God, all this kind of thing. And when we left, because my dad was so well known, they didn't want anyone to know that someone as big as my dad was having any kind of difficulties in their marriage, because that's not on brand. So they actually blamed it all on my mom. And I know that's something that she still harbors some bitterness towards, rightfully so, I get it. They told everyone that my mom couldn't handle the busyness of the day-to-day of First Baptist, and it was causing her a lot of health issues. So because of that, my dad is moving us to Grace Baptist so that way we can stay involved in the ministry, but take a step back from my mom's health. And he decided to send us to Grace. If I can get, I was a little younger, but from what I can tell from the timelines, we were sent to Grace Baptist around the time that the police were called on Aaron Willand. So and obviously I can't prove that Scott knew what was going on there, but we've seen enough of the stuff in the IFB with everyone being passed around. Like, I'd be very surprised if Scott didn't know what was going on up there, and he sent us there anyway. He called Jenkins to let him know that we were coming and why we were relocating and all this kind of stuff. And so that way my parents could get couples counseling once we got settled up in Gaylord. And told them that, they want a clean start. So don't go telling everybody in the church, which shouldn't have to be said. If you're sending someone somewhere for counseling, you don't go tell everybody, And we moved up there a couple months later, and our first Sunday at the church, everyone already knew why we were moving to Gaylord. Half the parents in the church wouldn't let their kids play with me and my sister, because what if, their parents are having some problems right now. So what if, they've got a demon in the house and you're going to get it from playing with the kids and they're going to be a bad influence. And it took us a year to actually start making friends that would hang out with us outside of school, because you weren't allowed to hang out with the others. And It took us a while. And I think that was the first step of my parents actually seeing what this actually was. But again, it was so much easier to see at Grace because it was a lot smaller. They still think that First Baptist is a great place, and all of this. They still love Brother Hyles. They still have all of his stuff, and credit where credit is due. They do see Scott for what he is. They don't hold him in any good light anymore, but they're still very bought into it. But Grace started the cracks for them, but I think they thought it was just a Grace Baptist problem. Then once we moved back to North Sharon, they went back to church again.
So when you guys were at Grace, were they undergoing counseling with Pastor Jenkins at all, or?
Nope, they tried to do that still. And every time they talked to him about setting up that first appointment, he said that he would call them or he'd get in touch or, yep, we'll get it figured out. And I don't think they saw him one time.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how long did you guys go there?
We were at Grace for 6 years, 5 years, because it was half of my 8th grade year and then all of high school. So about 5 years or so. I stayed attending the entire time we were there. My sister attended for most of it, but I think she left the IFB a lot sooner than I did. I think because she was a lot younger when we left First Baptist, it was easier for her to kind of take that step back and be like, what? But I was convinced, like I was taught at First Baptist that if I walked away from God, he would do anything he needed to do to get me back in with him, even if that meant killing off my family members. Whatever it was he needed to do, that's what would be done. And when we moved to Gaylord and my parents stopped going to church and my sister started to just kind of do what she wanted to do, and she was going through her normal rebellious phase, which in the IFB is a much bigger deal, but like she wasn't doing anything any normal teenager would do, and listening to music and stuff. And but I was convinced that I was the only thing keeping my family from like facing God's wrath. I went every single Sunday because I thought for sure that if I stopped going, then the family would actually fall apart and God would start doing who knows what to get our attention again, to like get us back into church. And I was so afraid of that, which is something no child should be thinking about, like ever. But that's just how we were raised. That's what they did. That's how they brainwash you so vigorously at such a young age, because from the time I was in 2nd grade, I was being taught that if I walked away from God, he'd, make my grandma and grandpa get in a car accident or make my baby sister get really sick and be in the hospital, or, crazy things like that. So yeah, I attended Grace the whole time we were there. But after that first, I'd say about 3 months, my dad stopped going. And then it took another 3 to 4 months for my mom to stop going. And then my sister was just here and there when she felt like getting out of the house.
So because like you said, like your parents kind of saw Gaylord for what it is. Was there were they aware of like abuse, or like what made them say, you know what, like ew, like I don't want to go?
Right. I don't know if they were aware of any of the abuse that was going on up there. If they are or were, we never had any conversations about it. I think the thing for them was just, in IFB speak, all the sin. The teenagers being allowed to do the things that they wanted to do. They were catching teenagers out in the bus barn on a regular basis together. Yeah, just things like that. That my mom witnessed, because they happened a few times while she was teaching. And then the fact that nothing was done about it. Not just, oh, we're going to keep it quiet, but they'd be like, yeah, whatever, they're teenagers, just send them back to class. And like in a public school, it's like, yeah, they're teenagers. What do you want me to do about it? It's a little, maybe call their parents, but like it's not a thing that you have to do anything about. But in what we were in, that's a massive ordeal. That's the kind of stuff that in some churches would get you sent to one of the girls' homes, but they just shrugged their shoulders, kind of chuckled at it, and that was it. Scott Jenkins would be preaching from the pulpit about purity and staying close to God and giving more and offerings and us supporting the like all this different stuff, just like Scott and Hyles did. But like the background of the church was a completely different thing. And I think that's what made my parents have that factor and just walk away from it all. But I think they saw Jenkins as like what he was, which is basically just an abusive scam artist. We have been giving money up there, not we anymore, but to the building fund for decades, and they haven't even started to reach their goal. But Jenkins gets a new $50,000 truck every year and a $30,000 motorcycle, and they had this massive house with acres and acres and acres of property with every toy you could imagine on it. All that kind of stuff. And people for years were saying that they're just taking the money and embezzling it and not that's why the building fund isn't growing, and that my parents saw pretty quickly, but I don't know if they were aware of any of like the sexual abuse and things like that. I don't think they really saw it.
So if they didn't see it, when did you first experience or become aware of the abuse?
So I first became aware of the abuse when it started happening to me. There were little things looking back that I noticed earlier, but because we never had sex education, we didn't have any real world experience, you don't have the ability to look at something and be like, ooh, that's not okay. Because you don't have a frame of reference, you don't have anything to compare it to. So there were little things, but even now, I don't know if it was abuse or just people just did things up there that weren't okay at First Baptist, because some of it was between teens. Some of it was like there were one or two adult men in the church that seemed a little too friendly with some of the teenagers, but they were magically called to another church a year or two after I was there. And I don't remember their names. They were around for 6 months and, stuff like that. But, that kind of stuff seemed to be fairly normal. I mean, I don't want to say it was all normal because not everybody up there is that way, but like it was something that I noticed from time to time when I was up there. But like with me, there was I had a best friend up there who saved me from this guy for a couple of years because she grew up in a normal environment. She grew up in public school. Her parents got into the IFB just 2 or 3 years before. So she actually was able to see like, wait a minute, that's not right. But there was a college kid there who actually grew up with my parents at North Sharon, but decided to go to Grace Baptist instead of Hyles-Anderson because they had a college as well. And he was just always trying to hang out with me and my friend, always trying to hang out, always trying to be around, just something like. And for me, it was just like he's just this weird dude who I don't like, but he knows me and whatever. But she was always shooing him away. And then her family moved to Texas, and then he just swooped in. He started it all by saying that he wanted to get back together with one of his ex-girlfriends, and her and I were friendly. So he's like, well, you could be our third wheel and like be our chaperone on our date, because every date has to have a chaperone, no matter how old you are. And he used that as a way to get me to go do something with him. But my parents were going to say yes to it because I'm just going out with a couple of my friends and that kind of thing. And after 2 or 3 times of doing that, he started doing the things I had seen the other adult men do. Just putting his hand on the small of my back every now and then as he walked by, or doing the, little thing, which even in the IFB, that is not allowed between a guy and a girl. So
how old were you?
I was 15 to 16.
Okay.
And he was about 24.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so like right in that age where like technically I was above the age of consent in Michigan, but I was still a minor. But that's
end of story. End of story. He was a freak. He yeah.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. But yeah, it just kept going and going. He did eventually, actually start molesting me and stuff. He would come over to the house, like my house, when my parents were at work because they both worked retail jobs. and he just got to know their schedule, and he would just show up in the middle of the day. If I ever tried to say no or like push him off, he would just make comments about my sister and be like, "Oh, I wonder what she's doing right now. I wonder if she'd want to hang out." Just little stuff like that. Um, he had a solid gold class ring that he got when he finished high school that he got a chain for, and like I had to wear it all the time. And like Gaylord's a small place. So, and like I had a very specific car. So it was not hard to be driving around and see, "Oh, look, she's over there at, Big Lots right now." And if he ever found me out and about without it on, he'd get super pissed off and get all angry at me, and then again start making comments about my sister. So it only happened once that I didn't, because I was terrified. I didn't know who to go to. I didn't even know what was happening enough to explain to someone, "Hey, this guy's doing something that's not okay. I need help." I didn't know how to handle any of it. Um, my parents noticed us talking once when we were doing like a big we would do bonfires all the time because we had a couple acres in the backyard, and they noticed something in the way that he was talking to me, and they pulled me aside and asked if there was something going on between the two of us. And I said yes, and but like that's literally all I said was yes, and they assumed that we liked each other. And they even asked some follow-up questions, but I was so scared of, like, I didn't know what to do. Like, part of growing up in the IFB is, the men are always right. The man of God is always right. You don't question the man of God. And even though he wasn't a pastor, that's what he was going to school for. He was almost done with it. There's the part of grooming that makes you feel like you need to protect the person that's doing these things to you. And so I answered the questions as basically as I could when my parents were asking about it, to where they just thought that we liked each other. They asked him what was going on, and he said that, "I like your daughter and I'd like your permission to date her." And they said yes.
Now,
And
how old were you when that happened?
I was 16.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So
They
that,
weren't aware of the abuse that was happening.
no, they had no idea.
So did you have a conversation with them later on to say, "Mom, Dad, I don't want to date him," or "I don't feel comfortable," or anything like that?
No, I ended up just staying with him until college. He did not want me to go to college. He wanted me to stay there and go to Grace instead, because then we could just keep being together. And I went back and forth on it. My parents knew that I was questioning whether or not I wanted to go, but they were trying to encourage me because it's Hyles. That's your legacy. Of course you go to Hyles. And I told him that I had decided to stay. And then, like 3 weeks before, like the time that you leave to go to college, I made the decision, like, it's my only way out. I felt so guilty about leaving my sister behind because I was convinced that he was just going to replace me with her. But like, it was a few months of just panic and terror and all of that. Um, I waited until the last possible second to tell him that I was going, and just did. He was pretty angry at me. But my sister at that point, she told me years later that he actually did try once. When she was sitting on the couch, I had gone to the bathroom and he put his arm around her. She didn't see it for what it was, but to her, she hated him. So she just saw him as like this nasty, like, kind of guy. So she just shrugged him off and kind of like smacked him away, and he never tried anything again. So I think her having her attitude of like, "Yeah, screw you, man," kind of stopped that in its tracks, thankfully. But yeah, I got to Hiles, and then like the texting started. He would send me pictures of him in his car on the highway saying that he's coming to get me and he's gonna take me far away, and we'll never have to see like our families again, and we can just start over together somewhere. And it got worse and worse. The second year of college, I knew a few of the guys that were on security, and I was able to tell them what was going on because it just wasn't stopping. And they, went on his Facebook account, got his picture and everything. And most of the guys on security knew about him. Like my parents still didn't know. The college staffs, no one else, no one who should have known actually knew what was going on. but we made sure that his name was on staff or on like the security list. So they wouldn't let him on campus. Because it was like every week he was sending me a picture of himself coming to get me. And, it was going to take me far away and all of that. It went on all through college. Um, and then when I moved back from college to Jackson and went back to North Sharon, he ended up moving back to there. He was still up in Grace at this point. And then he moved back to North Sharon. And then he kept, I moved several times when I moved back to Jackson because he kept just figuring out the area that I was living in. And he would send me a picture of like the fast food place across the street and just say, see you in 5 and stuff like that. I told my ex about it once right before we got married that he was like, he knew that things had happened with him, but didn't know that like the stalking was still happening. And I told him about it and he shrugged and said, I don't know, just stop texting him, and never brought it up again. Never, no help, no protectiveness, no, okay, let's try to get somebody involved. Let's go get a restraining order. Nothing. It was just, I don't know, just stop texting him. And like, that was it. That was the end of it. But I did not finally get rid of him until I left my ex and moved out to a new city with my best friend, my now fiance. And he helped me, like, actually, because like again, there's those years of grooming and everything, and it's hard to actually stop responding when he does text you because there's that fear of, and again, coupled with the IFB fear of like the disappointment and letting someone down, and the man, it was very difficult. But finally got rid of him, and then about 9 months later, he got COVID and died. So nobody's problem now. But yeah, and I know for a fact that he had tried with several other girls after I left. I was able to stop it from several of them. I found out that he was talking to, just being buddy with a couple of the other 16-year-olds, because that's his sweet spot at North Sharon, and I called their parents and said, the same thing happened with me. This is where this is going to end for you. And thankfully they listened, and told their kids to stop talking to him. They all did. One of the girls that he tried to do that with, her and I are still friends to this day. We bonded over it. But yeah, and
So
so
he was
many.
communicating during your marriage?
Yes.
Okay. And what did your ex-husband think of that, other than just to say, well, stop texting him?
I brought it up to him the one time. I had a panic attack because he had sent me a picture from like literally across the street from my house. And he just rolled his eyes, got annoyed that he was having to pause his video game to deal with me having a meltdown. And then he never even brought it up to me again. He never asked me about it again, nothing. So I just didn't bring it up to him because it was harder to tell the person who's supposed to love you and care about you and protect you that this man is out there trying to hurt me and you don't care than it was to just deal with it by myself.
Did you ever talk to either Jenkins at the time when you were younger, or the pastor of the North Sharon Baptist Church, about what you were dealing with the stalking?
No, I never went to, so the one for Jenkins, I never went to him because I saw how he handled anybody else who had a problem in that church. They were either ignored, or you would go to him with a very specific, serious problem. You'd be promised help and secrecy. And then just by chance, the next Wednesday, the sermon would be all about that problem, and done in a way to where if you know even the outskirts of what's happening, now you know who he,
Yeah.
that's just how we handled everything. So I had thought about going to him, but only for like 5 minutes because I was so scared that he would blame me and tell me that it was my fault, ask me what I was wearing, all the usual things that they tend to do. I obviously caused this man to lust after me as a child in floor-length jean skirts and oversized Star Wars t-shirts. Obviously it was my fault.
Star Wars t-shirt. Yeah, I when you
Literally,
said
that's all I ever
about
wore.
like 3 girls that I actually know. Yeah.
Because you were allowed to wear that, honestly.
Right.
Yeah, we talk about this with, like, I was talking with my mom. I got in trouble for wearing it's so stupid. Like, what the heck? a NASA shirt and it had like all the planets, right? And I got it from Walmart for like $5. And it was like one of those shirts that you didn't care about getting dirty because you were going to youth.
Yeah.
And how dare I wear a NASA shirt, and have Earth and like, and they were like, that's a science shirt, and that contradicts. I think like can't remember how my youth pastor worded it, but like it was the stupidest thing ever. Like literally, they were like, if you wear it again, you'll have to go upstairs and to the donation box and get a shirt. And I'm like, I'm not doing that. And it's a donation box anymore. I'm wearing my NASA shirt, but I actually never wore it again. And I would just wear it to school or whatever. But like I jokingly, like me and my mom talk about that. I'm like, I got in trouble for wearing the space shirt.
Kind of your fault. You should know the planets were put there by Satan to confuse us.
Yeah.
I mean,
sorry. Yeah. It's like things like that. And it's so funny.
Yeah.
And so like obviously, like you said, like you didn't really go to John Jenkins or any of that. So when did you tell your parents, like when did you finally start vocalizing to your parents a lot of the things?
So I told my mom what had actually, like the very basic part of what had actually happened with this guy. I would say probably 2014. So right 2014, 2016, somewhere right in there. So it would have been 6 to 8 years after it happened that I finally told her. And all I told her was that we weren't actually dating. He was touching me and, inappropriately. I was able to actually use those words now because I knew what they were now, Well, I asked you if it, she got kind of defensive about it, but I think it was more of a mama doesn't want to think that she let her baby girl be hurt, but we talked about it once or twice over like a 2 or 3 year period, and then we never talked about it again, which is fine. She doesn't need to know all the details of what happened. If she were ever to ask me, because like I don't even know if she knows about the documentary, but if she were to watch the documentary and then come back and be like, I need to know if all this stuff is true, I would tell her anything she wants to know, to help her process that no, bad things do happen in this. Just because it's a church doesn't mean that it's good, But my dad and I honestly don't know if he even knows. We have never talked about it. We've never discussed it. He's never brought, I don't even know if my mom has told him. I don't know when it comes to my dad.
So within your marriage, I'm assuming the abuse that you received from the other guy, did that affect your marriage at all, with your husband at the time? And also a follow-up question to that, when you finally divorced him, how long till you left the IFB, and what were kind of like the things that kind of fell into place to leaving the IFB after your divorce?
Okay. So I think the abuse did have an effect on the marriage, but it's hard for me to tell what was from that and what was just the rest of the IFB, if that makes sense. Because I feel like a lot of that stuff overlaps. I dealt with a lot of, I would be sitting on the floor crying because I messed up dinner. He'd come home to find me on the floor crying because dinner got messed up and now it's not right, and I'm supposed to have it ready for you when you get home. I'm supposed to have, this and this done if I couldn't handle the housework and whatever it was, it would just be a meltdown on my end because I couldn't live up to what being a wife was supposed to be. And then there was also the side, like in the bedroom, of just, I didn't know anything. I didn't know what my own body parts were, much less how to properly please my husband. And, the flip of that, like, he didn't know either. Like, he couldn't tell me how to please him, and I couldn't tell him how to please me. And so there was a lot of just the purity culture aspect of just not knowing anything. And then just the fear of not being enough and not being good enough and not making him happy and all of that, which again, I think is kind of both. I think it comes from the abuse and the purity culture and the IFB and everything. I think a lot of it really does overlap. But yeah, so it did affect it. I think it affected it more in like the trust and intimacy because of the fact that he knew about it and just didn't seem to care. That broke a lot. I didn't feel safe and secure and protected and those things that in any relationship your husband is supposed to give to you. I didn't feel any of that because he just didn't care that this man was causing me stress and harm. And even though he was no longer physically able to harm me, mentally and emotionally, he was causing me stress almost every day. And that it affected more of that side. But then when it came to leaving, I think I had started seeing the cracks in the IFB when Scott got arrested.
Sexual relationship with a 17-year-old girl and said essentially that Jesus made him do it. As a pastor, he led a flock of 15,000. Now, Jack Scott is facing years in prison.
Scott became my pastor when I was in 4th grade. So Hyles was my pastor for the first few years of my life. And then when he passed away, obviously Scott took over. So for the good majority of my life, Scott was who I knew as my pastor. I actually have him on the table just in case you guys wanted to see him. But like I have the blue denim and lace that they have at First Baptist, which is like their version of like Girl Scouts or whatnot. You would get pins for just learning different things, just like badges and Girl Scouts. And if you got so many in a year, you won the pastor study award, where you actually got to go to the office for like a pizza party after church one night with Brother Scott.
Didn't have a program for the boys like this. It was just
yes. The boys one was called Baptist Boys Battalion, and our uniforms were all camo and looked just like military.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, like I said, literally taught from birth to be soldiers in the army of God.
I would say I've heard Jack Hyles like in sermons. This is it, we are soldiers, and I was like, oh,
yes.
Lord,
Yep, I think like you hear that a lot in churches, but I think a lot of churches like there seems to be like Hyles, and then like the church is just like it gets further and further out, where like these churches are still IFB, but maybe they're okay with their women wearing pants, or they don't think there seems to be like severity, like the level. A lot of churches just in general, but mainly IFB, use the whole like we're soldiers, but I feel like the ones on like the outer edges of it mean it more as like we've got work to do, God sent us here for a purpose, we have a mission. They mean it lightheartedly.
I used to sing like in the Lord's army, right on, left on, and you're marching.
Yes, yeah.
As a kid, you're just like, oh, but then
it's
like
just a fun song.
People just
yes. Like I was talking to a friend of mine who went to Hyles with me. She met her husband at Hyles, and they're still married. They've got 3 great kids, all this. But her husband is in the military, like a branch of the military, and he pointed out that most of the songs that we grew up singing on the bus are actually just like military marching songs.
Right.
That they've changed. Like some of them I knew, but like there were a lot of them that I was like, wait, really? So it's like even like the songs that we're singing as children to get us like amped up and hyped about church are just freaking military songs. Like what? So
a lot of the IFB pastors or people who have these homes or whatever, I can't like last night I could have said another Marine or another, and I hate to be like that, but like they all have some type of like military background, or they always say they're a doctor. I'm like, you're not a doctor. Like stop saying you're a doctor. You're not a doctor. But they always be like Dr. Bubba or brother this, and I'm like, no.
Right. No. It's like, you got your doctor thing at the beginning of it because Hyles-Anderson College said, we like you, here's a piece of paper.
Yeah.
You're not a doctor. Like it
Yeah. What did the girls have to wear again?
The girls' dresses were like I still have some of it. It's just like a blue, like a cotton material that's kind of like a denim color.
Can you
put my pins still from it? But it's just like a blue, like cotton material, and it's just a dress that has like white lace on the bottom of it, and then like on the sleeves and around the collar and everything. And then you had, I'm trying to remember exactly, I'm sure I could find a picture of it online somewhere, but then you'd have like a place to like pin all of your pins to your dress, but there were so many. It was so heavy to wear all of them on your dress.
Even
What
for
would you have to
Awanas,
do?
remember the patches?
Yes,
And you would have, she was horrible. She'd be like, hold on, we have to hot glue them because like they're not, sewed in.
Right.
Put some in, but like
Yeah, and then ours were like actual like pins that you can put on. But like some of the stuff that we learned in Blue Denim and Lace was actually very helpful. Like I learned how to make macrame plant holders and cross stitching and how to sew a button on and like just like some basic stuff that's every girl should know it in your life. And then I have pins for things like caring and bus worker as a fourth grader. And I have multiple Bible reading pins and the Fanny Crosby gospel music pin. I don't even remember what the heck that was about.
It's me.
I have the yeah, I have the
Probably
mission
because you were
pin.
singing in the Lord's Army really good. They gave you a pen for it.
Right? That's probably what it was, like for real. I remember I posted this on like my Instagram page and everyone was asking like what certain ones were. And I'm trying to find, I can't remember exactly what it's called, but it was the Beverly Hyles pin and it was just for grooming.
Like keeping yourself clean and nice.
I think so.
Oh, wow.
Like I think I had right, but like at first, like looking back now, I wonder if that's actually what it was. But
Yeah.
yeah, it was a mess. But yeah, you won these if you did a good job. Oh.
See, I like that you have these. So, okay, so now, you're in, obviously you are getting married September. So where are you at, like, with your beliefs now? Are you in church? Are you not? Can you talk a little bit about that?
So I am not in church now. I would, I guess, consider myself agnostic,
Okay.
for like that. I know some people leave and like go straight up atheist and like hate everything that has to do with church and religion and like I get it. I wouldn't say I'm there. I have no love lost for IFB churches, but like, people who if you find a religion that makes you feel comfortable and happy and makes you feel like you're just making the world a better place, whatever it is that it does for you, and the important part, you're not shoving it down anyone else's throat, I have no problem with it. I have friends that are still good friends that either left the IFB with me or I met somewhere else in life that are very religious, attend every Sunday. They've invited me to their church in passing, but like that's it. It's not something that every time we talk, they have a personal mission to make sure that I know that because they believe this and I don't believe this bad thing is. If you're not doing any of that, like I don't, you do what makes you happy,
I mean, that I know personally, they have chose, the more agnostic, some would say they're atheists, but a lot of them, they would say like their number one issue is like down the throat or whatever. So
yeah,
for Christians like me and Jen, how can we approach that, so we're not coming off that way? Because like, obviously, like, again, I'm a Christian. I've had deep conversations. Like I believe not because like somebody else tells me to, or my parents, I'm on this reconstructing path for me. And what do I believe? Like like 3 years ago, I'm like, what do I believe? Like or I would be like, God, just give me a sign. And then I'm like, God doesn't really work that way in some ways. Now, sometimes I'd be like, oh, okay, can I have a sign? And then like a year later, I'm like, that was the sign I needed a year ago, but I see you, type of
right.
thing.
Yeah.
But how can Christians go away so we're not like offending you on that way and vice versa? Like, like how can we have this open discussion where I could say, like, how can I don't want to be like, so can I pray with you at the end of this episode? Because I know that you are agnostic, but I also want to never hurt God in the way like what I'm doing either.
Right. Yeah. Like, I feel like even like I haven't prayed in years, but I don't get offended when people ask if they can pray for me. I feel like most of the people that I know that would consider themselves agnostic or even atheist don't get offended when someone asks if they can pray for you. Because and it's all about the way it's done. Because like if you were to ask me right now, I know that it would be your religious person, the way that you send happy thoughts, or whatever. Like everyone's got their thing that like that's how they have that, that's just how you do that. That's your faith. That's what you do in your life. And it is you being a positive person towards me. when people who are the kind of people that tend to offend others ask if they can pray for you, it's done with this tone of like, oh, can I pray for you?
Yeah.
Correct.
You know, like when it's done that way, it's like, no, you're trying to talk down to me. You
Yeah.
think that what I'm doing is a bad thing. You think I'm a bad person. You think less of me as a human. Like it comes off in that way. And you're not praying for me to just have a great rest of my day and hopefully God blesses you. And that's not what you're doing. You're saying, God, can you make sure that this person sees what they're doing wrong and like fix her attitude?
Who have heard it your whole life in the way, unfortunately, that is cult-like, who that is so far from God. Like, I mean, like literally so far from God. But that's something like I had to learn. And you know, chose the other path. Like, you know what? You know, I don't want any of that. If that's God, I don't want any of it. That's not, you know, yeah, type of thing. So I'm always curious how to come, definitely as a podcast host, how to come off in a way like I'm not going to offend you, but like I always say, if you respect me, I'll respect you.
Exactly.
I would, you know, type of thing. I would never look at you and say, I'm going to pray for you because I know I'm a better Christian. Like, no, I've had that happen to me and you're not a better Christian. You know, oh, I've had people say, why are you in the nursery today? You know, you should be in the auditorium. But here, you go in the auditorium and I'll cover your shift for the nursery. No, we all need that in my, you know, in my opinion. But I understand where it can come off that way. Or instead of coming from a place with love that is the true God, it's more hate and offensive. So I'm always curious how to approach that when I do speak with people who are agnostic or atheists, especially in the IFB world that, you know, they chose a different path, how to have that discussion. So I'm glad that we were able to discuss that on this episode.
Yeah, I think for most people, it's just the way that it's meant. And I think you can usually tell pretty easily the attitude and the intent behind people saying those kinds of things. It's usually very obvious how they mean it. And yeah.
When you were going through your divorce, did you feel like people in the church were maybe judging you and weren't like supportive of you at all? Talking behind your back, making up rumors or whatever. Did you get that feel, or did you just like kind of cold turkey, just like after your divorce, you're like, I'm gone. I'm just not even going to deal with it?
A little bit of each. Before the divorce, he wasn't going to church with me on Sundays. And I was definitely feeling that kind of stuff then of like, oh, I'm obviously failing in some way because my husband's not coming to church with me, you know, so they were like that kind of thing. But no, when I left him, I cold turkey it. I have not set foot back in an IFB church other than one time to go with my dad for like a special event, since then. But yeah, no, I cut it cold turkey. I had already started seeing the cracks and things when Scott left. It shook a lot of stuff for me, but it shook my faith in Scott, you know, and that's what made me realize that I'm putting more faith and trust in him than I am God. You know, like the two have just merged together, and that happens a lot at First Baptist, you know. So when I made the decision to leave him, it took me months to like save up the money to be able to get out and all that, but it gave me that time to start to kind of realize, like at that point I still had my IFB faith. I just felt like the churches that I had been stuck in were very not okay and very harmful and toxic. So I decided to stop going to church for a while and leave my ex. And then in that time is when I started deconstructing and saw just how messed up the IFB itself was, because I was getting normal real life experience for the first time. And that's what kind of, I think that was the first, I think that was probably the big thing for me. And I think that again, like realizing that Scott was kind of my God, you know, and for a lot of us at that age, that's how it was, how you were taught to look at them. I think that's probably where a lot of it did come from. Because I mean, like for me, like when my parents went to Hyles-Anderson, we couldn't afford to pay for 4 school bills. And Scott personally paid for me and my sister to attend Hammond Baptist the whole time we were there. And when we decided to move to Gaylord, he just took me and my sister into his office and gave us each our own special goodie bag with like road trip snacks and little crossword puzzles and stuffed animals and all this stuff for us for our trip. Like he was pretty personally involved in like major moments of my life. And then when we moved to Gaylord, my new pastor is kind of scummy. My dad's not attending church anymore and he's very distant and all that. So I kind of lost him a little bit. And then the other guy that I met that's trying to step in and be a father figure is abusing me. Well, I'm going back to Hyles. At least I have Scott. I know he's a good guy. And then he goes and does all the stuff and it was kind of that last straw for me of just, the men are supposed to be this great, amazing, wonderful, can do no wrong men of God substitutes. And I went through a phase of thinking they were all scum, understandably so. Don't feel that way anymore. I think individuals can be scum, but just because you're a man or woman doesn't make you better. But yeah, I think Scott's definitely a big part of that hurt though.
Yeah, no, and I mean, I've been very vocal. Like, I have a lot of church hurt, and I've made it very clear. I don't think it'll ever go away. It will never go away. Actually, I know for a fact. And I can do much therapy, but it will never go away because you put all this hope in your faith, and you're like, oh, this is a man of God. Oh, blah blah blah. And then again, like my youth pastor had the balls to stand on a random Sunday in like 2016, 17. I don't even know when it was. And I was in the nursery and I heard that he literally confessed that he had never been saved. And I was like, yep. And I remembered, and I talked about it on my episode. I remember every emotion, and I still, like, when I hear his name, his voice alone just makes me so mad. I do have that anger, and people will listen to this from my former church. And they're like, see, yep, she's anger. She has so much better, you know what I mean? Like that thing, but it's legit real emotions. And it's something like, and they'll be like, well, that's her issue. We did nothing wrong. And it's really, no, if you take accountability, I think there would be some type of healing thing, but they never do. They never take accountability. And so I think that's a lot of the issues, like, even like with you, like your ex-husband, all that, like if they took accountability, I don't think we would have that much church hurt compared to what we have now. But because there's no accountability, there's no, hey, you know what? I did wrong. I'm sorry. Or I'm sorry that I'm sorry you feel that way, but that's
right. Like, I made a mistake. I apologize. Yeah.
And let's just, whatever. If I got that, well, I would still feel some type of way towards the situation. But it wouldn't be like PTSD for me. Like, I always joke around like, oh, I got PTSD, like, no, I legit do, because there is that hurt. And I was extremely close with my youth pastor and wife at that time. Because I went through a rough patch in my teenage years. And so I was looking for that validation of a godly relationship, because my parents were not one. So that was a lot of church hurt. And a lot of people don't realize that. They think I'm just here to bash. They're like, oh, you're just here to bash. Yeah, I can bash all I want, but in reality, it's just coming from a hurt place, because no accountability has been taken.
Right. It's like everyone's going to make mistakes. Every church, school, business, everybody has something where there's someone in it that does something terrible. And because they're humans, like, it's not like, I would not think poorly of a church who had a youth pastor that abused a child under their care and protection if they just came out and said, as soon as we found out about this, we called the police. He is now in jail. Police have all. I wouldn't think bad, because you as a church did not do this thing. That person did. But when you cover it up and move them around, now you are the one who abused that child, and you have facilitated all the other children that he's going to. Like, why would I want to come and hang out with you guys? Why would I want to hear anything you have to say about what you think God is? Because whatever God you guys are serving that encourages that, that's not, like, and that's something else that I have too, is like, I'm like you talking about the other guy who's like, who's looking for that sign. It's like, I do think that there is a God out there, but the IFB God, I don't think that he exists. And if he does not deserve my love and adoration in any way whatsoever.
Yeah.
Like, the God of the Bible might be, the God that's out there. He might be, be real and all that stuff. Like, I'm agnostic. I'm not like, nope, he doesn't exist. But the God that we were raised to believe in church, do not believe in him anymore. Think he's a monster. But
no, and rightfully so, because we've all been conditioned to believe and this is what I always say, man-made standards.
Yes.
They make it seem like it's God's word. So when you take the time, I always say, when your blinders come off and you just take a step back, like, get away, take the blinders off. And then when we're realizing throughout the years, and then the documentaries that are coming out,
Yeah.
And the whole mindset of like, you can't believe everything you hear, or there's two sides to stories. I 100% doubt, well, I know for a fact that these women and men on these shows are not going on there for TV fame. They are hurt. They want to be hurt
Right.
in so many ways. And what's crazy is almost every single person is tied to somebody too. And it's so crazy. But that just of the cult, like, you know, we're all tied together. Like, you can say we're independent, but you're not independent. You guys are all tied together. And if you think you're independent, you might want to reconsider things. So
do you, before we wrap up, right, do you have, if you could tell the pastors in the IFB something as far as like advice or any
or pastor wives too,
that's good. Yeah. Thank you. Youth pastors wife, youth pastor's wife, in the IFB, if you could, you know, if they're listening, what would you say to them? Would you have some kind of advice to give to them when it comes to the church or abuse within the church? Anything like that?
I mean, it's okay to ask questions and think critically. If something doesn't seem okay, just because someone who's in a position of authority over you says that it's okay, doesn't mean that it is. Like, there's so many times that I would see, you know, youth pastor or assistant like wives see something or hear something that they wanted to help on, or just didn't seem quite right, you know, whatever it was, but they would have to talk to their husband about it first. And then their husband would say, no, that's not our bit, or no, that's what got, whatever it was, you know, and especially for the women, like, you just get pushed down, like, you just be quiet. You aren't allowed to go and, you know, help fix something that's going on with a teenage girl. You and your husband have to do it. Even if you do it alone with her, the husband's involved, you know, and there's so much pressure on keeping the testimony of the church as the number one priority that they forget about the individuals in the church. And I think that's one of the biggest problems, especially like we talked about, like, you know, it gets tighter, the tighter it gets, the more that happens. Like, I think all the time about how different my life would have been if Scott wasn't worried about someone finding out that my parents weren't perfect human beings and sent us away to Gaylord. Like, how different would I be as a person right now?
Right.
But he was so worried about that. And it's all like the church's testimony is the priority. So all the people that you're supposed to be a shepherd to, they're just getting picked off one at a time. But as long as the army keeps growing, it doesn't matter about them. They're expendable. They're on the front lines. They're the pawns. And like, they really do treat it like an army, and like, we're all soldiers, and soldiers are expendable to them. But as long as like everyone else fears the army, it doesn't matter what's going on to the individuals, because, you know, we're still going strong and everyone still thinks First Baptist is great. But it happens in the little churches too. And, you know, again, just take a step back. Like you said, like, COVID was great for that. You know, like, I left my ex right when COVID started, and being locked in the house with him really did help me see that this was the right decision. But just like, even when you go on vacation somewhere, you have to have an IFB church lined up to attend, or you're out of God's will. Like,
that was something I was not.
Oh yeah, no, that was big.
My youth.
And if something bad happens on your vacation, it's probably because you didn't go to church on vacation.
Yep.
Yeah, that fear.
Like, there's no break from it. You get so stuck in the echo chamber.
Right.
That it's just like, you can't even go on a week vacation to get away without also going to somewhere else for Sunday morning, Sunday night, and Wednesday church. Like,
it's insane. And I also, I've been like saying this since like day one, and I think it just comes also with like who my mom is too. Like, women are not second class. So like, even if you're the pastor's wife, you do not deserve that. You do not. There's a difference between biblical submissive versus abuse. There is a huge difference, and they get so tied up into that, and it's so. And you know, there is times where I look back and I look at a lot of the women that I know, and I'm like, you are a victim, but you just don't realize you're a victim, but you are truly a victim. And like, there is so many victims in that church without even realizing there's victims, because they think this is the biblical way. This is, whatever. Yeah. So,
yeah. If you're in any kind of group where they can say something that's insane and people either cheer it on or it's messed up, but you don't feel like you can say what, like in the documentary, like Hyles standing up and saying that for every man who's in jail for raping a woman, the woman should be in the cell. I heard that all the time at First Baptist.
All of these women in shorts. Who slew all of these poor kids that are the girls pregnant before they're married? Caused the boys to get so stirred up passionately that they'll rape a girl. Brother, you listen to me. For every single man that goes to prison for rape, there ought to be right beside him a half-naked girl in the next cell.
It was not a shock for me to hear that on that document. It was difficult to listen to, hearing it from Hyles' voice the first time I watched it.
As an adult, yeah.
Like, just, it like hit me, but like the hardest part of that statement is how many men in the audience cheered.
Oh, yeah.
The moment of like, I'm not safe here.
Sad that we're conditioned to that, and it's sad to think that there's so many women in the IFB that believe they're second class. Like, you're not second class, you are just equal. Yes, men have different roles biblically, but like that,
and they're there for a reason. Even if you're not religious, it's fairly basic that there are things that men are better at and there are things that women are better at.
And not just by that's science. That's science.
Just as individuals, everyone has strengths and weaknesses. And like, even with my fiance, there's things that he takes care of around the house, bills, finances, whatever, because he's just better at them. And then there's other things that I take care of because I'm better at them. And that's okay, but like,
okay.
But in the IFB, women are only there to be, I hate this word, but a helpmeet, and that's your purpose in life. And
when you get told you just go to Bible college for your MRS degree, so I think also it comes back to also parents too in that way. But I appreciate. I'm used to this. I have to get used to this. I'm so used to saying I appreciate.
We probably take you a few episodes.
Yes, 100%. We appreciate this open discussion, you opening up and sharing not only about, Gaylord, Hyles. I mean, like, you covered a lot, and also, some deep things about, your past marriage. We're really excited to see what your future is like being a new wife. So we thank you so much for being on today's episode.
Yeah, it was fun. I enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Of course.